This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic! What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is September 4th, 2023. Happy Labor Day. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Luke Sylvia. Luke, what is going on, brother?
Well, what all the Gator haters are thinking, because we got many comments on YouTube. I even saw someone leave one today or yesterday asking me about them Gators. Yes, I am still licking my wounds. That was awful. It wasn't like it was competitive. Our O-line was trash. That was the biggest thing for me. Graham Mertz wasn't awesome, but he wasn't terrible. Just the offensive line needs to be cleaned up a lot. So that was my one takeaway from the game. And now I'm just hanging on to every word, every play as I can for this LSU FSU game, hoping that that dirty city up north doesn't get to enjoy a win today. So, in our beloved city, Orlando, the city beautiful, might I add. I don't want any of that. I need the Tigers to be happy and partying through the night.
The funniest thing to me was you posted to your Instagram story, like, all right, boys, don't let me down. And then 5 minutes in, you're like, it's 5 minutes in, and they're already letting me down. I found that to be pretty funny.
A lot of people found that amusing. I'm glad that people can laugh at my pain. But yeah, first play of the game, touchdown, strike. I just couldn't believe it. Some backup scrub, Bryson Barnes for Utah. It was just devastating, but is what it is. We move on.
And then UCF with the emphatic win in their first game. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, well, when you play Kent State or something, it's awesome. Congrats on the win, guys. The bounce house, I'm sure, was bouncing. You guys deserve it.
Oh, man. Well, again, I hope everybody is having a happy and fun, safe Labor Day. Couple of things that we want to touch on here. So we talked on the last episode, obviously, all this stuff has been going on about Dwight Howard and Magic fans, somewhat, well, for the most part, clamoring for Dwight to come back, and sign a one-day contract, retire with the team. Some people want him to come back and sign like a one-year contract and be a backup big for this roster. Just wanted to update you all. We talked about that poll that we were doing on Twitter on the last episode, and that finished with 796 votes, with 83.7% of our followers, or at least people that voted on the poll, saying that yes, Dwight should sign a one-day contract and retire with the Magic. Then Mike Bianchi of the Orlando Sentinel actually wrote a really nice piece just talking about how the tragedy that brought Dwight back to Orlando for this occasion just helped remind him of how good things were here in Orlando, and just talked about how something that stars need to consider is when you're getting ready to leave the team that you were drafted by and that you've really built something special with, and you're seemingly moving on for greener pastures, the love of the city and the fan base is not something that moves on with you. A lot of times you have to start over. So it's just something to consider. And I thought Mike Bianchi actually did a really nice piece, a really nice job with that piece, I should say. Luke, 83% of almost 800 votes. That's pretty. I don't think the conversation really needs to move forward. It's something that the Magic fan base wants.
I think it's a very different result than what we would have gotten prior to the Van Gundy funeral, to Dwight's posts. I think that Dwight, a lot of people forgave him after he did those things, and we talked a lot about it last episode, but it's true, and I think it just became overwhelmingly true since the results had essentially quadrupled since we talked about it after we had posted it and everything to Twitter. So, yeah, I think the people have spoken. We'll see if the front office listens. The front office goes to the beat of their own drum, so I don't know that it will happen or that they even care. This front office is removed from all that, right? We are so far removed from it. What, at this point, 12 years, 13 years? So
11.
We will see what they do. But I'm not holding my breath, but I do think it would be a lot of fun and really cool if we could have that happen.
So we put out a poll April 23rd of 2022, and we said August 9th of 2022, obviously, will be 10 years since the Magic traded Dwight Howard. How do you feel about Dwight 10 years later? And the options were still hate him, I've forgiven him, and then indifferent. That vote got 478 votes. 14.9% of that said still hate him. So that would be basically in line with the 16-70% that said no, the Magic should not sign Dwight to a one-day contract and retire his jersey. 43% said I've forgiven him. 42.1% said they were indifferent. So it seems like maybe that still hate him camp hasn't changed their mind at all, but that indifferent camp, maybe the recent events and things that Dwight has shared has changed their mind a little bit.
Yeah, and the minority of that is very vocal, which is not shocking.
More vocal, in fact.
Yeah, so that is why that maybe you would think that poll even back then would have been different, because you just see it all the time. People are just still pissed at Dwight and whatever. But yeah, it's just oftentimes that's how it goes. The smaller camp of people is usually very, very loud because they know they're the smaller part of the camp, but they want to make themselves heard. And at this point, I think that you should either be indifferent or move past it and want to welcome Dwight back to a one-day contract. You specifically said one day, and I think that some people probably still just were thinking, I don't want to sign back Dwight for anything, 10-day, whatever, right? Like, no, we just meant one day, literally, sign him to a contract, let him retire as an Orlando Magic, and I think it'd be right.
The Magic sort of did something similar with Hito. They didn't sign him to a one-day contract, but basically he announced his retirement through the Magic, and then they had a ceremony during a game to celebrate Hito, which is a cool idea. I don't know why. I think I'm a little bit more partial to the press conference where you have ownership up there and the front office up there and everybody just kind of talking about, hey, why this was important. Bring back your former teammates. A lot of the guys that we saw in that photo would be awesome. I don't know. I'm a little bit more partial to that style, but I just think it's time to do that. Maybe once Dwight officially announces his retirement from basketball, maybe that is when that will come, because that's something else that people have said oh, he's just doing this because he needs a team to play for at this point. And I don't totally agree, but I also understand where those people are coming from.
I don't think that like I said, the front office in place has no relation to the front office of old. The head coach is obviously very different. We've had so many head coaches since Stan. I don't know that that's the case. I think that he genuinely, as a whole, just being able to reminisce and everything, was finally able to, the picture came out, so he's oh, this is a perfect time. He may have came to the conclusions of being sorry and talking to Stan and all that a while ago, but he just felt, oh, this is fitting with everything going on, the pictures surfacing of the funeral and the conversations he probably had again with Stan and players and memories. That drums up all sorts of emotions. And I think that's where that comes from. I do agree with your sentiment of let's have a press conference, something more formal to where we can hear, because I do think that it would be a really good segue into what the Magic are building. Of we want the type of success that Dwight and that team led back then, and we're moving forward to that point, and we're so happy that Dwight can retire as an Orlando Magic and just go from there. I think that would be a really cool perspective and a good path to take. It's not like you're in the middle of a rebuild that's going terribly, you know what I mean? I think you're just in prime position to have something like that happen in the next year or two.
We were asked on Twitter, what would be the point of that? What would be the benefit of that? And honestly, at the end of the day, it's like a fan service kind of thing in reality, right? Signing Dwight and retiring and having a press conference or a ceremony during a game, what real benefit does it bring to the organization? But is it so wrong that as a fan who has rooted for this team my entire life and has seen fractured relationship after fractured relationship with our star players, with Shaquille O'Neal, with Penny Hardaway, with Tracy McGrady, with Dwight Howard, is it so wrong for me to just want something that's like warm and fuzzy and be like, you know what? The Magic, this didn't go perfect with the Magic, but at the end of the day, it was warm and fuzzy feelings. Everybody held hands, sang Kumbaya, and we were able to move on. And hey, look, now Dwight's able to come back to games and be celebrated. Now we can like really embrace, like, no, like, sure, Dwight played for a ton of other teams after he left here, but at the end of the day, everyone is going to remember Dwight for playing for the Magic. Is that so wrong that I want that? I don't feel like it is.
No, I mean, he almost played more seasons with Orlando than the other places combined that he went to, and he didn't, but it's very close. I think he played like 9 seasons or 10 seasons with other teams and 8 total with the Magic. I think it's deserved. We wouldn't trade anything, right, for those days to have those back. Obviously, we wish we could have won the NBA Finals, but I would kill for an NBA Finals appearance. I'd kill to come in second in the entire league right now, if I'm being quite honest. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be satisfied with that in totality, but from just a point blank standpoint, barring, considering what we've been through as fans the last decade plus, sue me. I would love to get back there. I'd do a lot to get there. So we will see what our front office cooks up. I am hoping, but not necessarily super optimistic that it happens. I would love it though.
The last thing that I'll say about this is there's also been some commentary just about like Dwight's relationship with the DeVos family and just kind of how that was fractured during the breakup, if you will. But like, you go through a breakup with your ex and you're like, oh, she's toxic or he's toxic, whatever. I don't want anything to do with them. And then you find like the new love of your life. And then all of a sudden that other person isn't so bad anymore. Or like when you're in the honeymoon stage with your new thing, that's the best time to be like, oh yeah, they weren't so bad. So like, we're looking at Paolo, we're looking at Franz, we're looking at this young team and we're all in love with them. It's like, oh, Dwight, you weren't so bad, buddy. Come back over. You know what I mean? Like, if there's any time for everybody to just kind of, bygones be bygones and shake hands and move on, like, this is the perfect time to do that when the franchise and the organization are really in the best spot since he left.
Yeah, agreed.
Moving on, so Jonathan Isaac announced, a few months ago, like the new apparel brand, the sports apparel brand Unitus that, he was creating. And at like the launch event, he revealed the Judah 1 that he's going to be releasing through Unitus and announced that he's going to be playing in that model this season, which led to a lot of fans sort of being, concerned about Jonathan Isaac, who has had injury problems in the past, playing in a model of a shoe that is really unproven on the NBA floor. And, it gave people sort of flashbacks to Lonzo Ball and like the Big Baller brand when he tried to launch his own shoe and the absolute failure that the Big Baller brand was, in terms of creating a signature basketball shoe. So I was just on YouTube this week, and a video came up from a podcast that Jonathan Isaac did with Ruslan KD. He's a YouTube creator. He has a podcast. Jonathan Isaac was on that podcast, and they started talking about the Unitus brand and started talking about the shoe. And a couple of highlights from that, Luke. Jonathan started to talk about how, like, the process of creating a shoe, that he is collaborating with a company called Soulworks, which is mostly comprised of ex-Nike and ex-Adidas executives and designers that have, like, I want to say some of those guys have like 25, 20, 17 years of experience working for these various companies and in different executive and designer roles. And basically what that company does now is, like, guys go to them to have like one-off basketball shoes created. So the fact that they have so much experience in the industry, Luke, at least for now, put my mind at ease when we're talking about like a super unproven shoe. Like, these guys know what they're doing. At least you would assume so, given their experience.
At the root of this, people just want to clown JI for wearing his own shoe because of injury history, his beliefs outside of basketball. So you're not going to win everybody over with this, with the facts of it all, unfortunately. But if you are an open-minded person, you should feel better about this. I feel better about this. You and I both were like, whoa, where is it? Like, why is he doing this? Why is it something that he wants to do?
I will say I gave him the benefit of the doubt because of how important this upcoming season is. It's like,
right, and
he's smarter than to just go with a shoe that some guy that he met in an alley created for him. Like, I figured this was the case, but I'm glad we got confirmation on that.
Right, but we didn't know it was the case. We didn't know the experience, right? Like,
True.
It's very different with the background of the people that are taking care of the shoe. We know that they have long experience, not just some people thought like, oh, he's probably not even using anybody that's had any experience, right? The people that wanted to clown on him more than others. So it is very reassuring, to say the least, that this is what's come out. The shoe seems like it'll be good. You don't have to sweat it. We're not going to really be able to blame a shoe for anything that happens at this point, but based on the knowledge that we've been given of the people behind it.
People absolutely still will, regardless of the facts. They absolutely
But those are the
will.
people that I don't listen to anyway. So I am interested, but I feel a lot better now knowing that.
Another point that came out from that interview is that JI went to like the design professor at UCF, and he basically put on like a contest where students in the UCF's design program were asked to make submissions for the shoes design, and then the 5 best were chosen and actually implemented, and those students were paid for the design. So it was kind of like their first gig, if you will, into like their design career. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then again, he'll be wearing them this season, and they'll be available for purchase around the season start. And he opted to have them manufactured in Vietnam rather than China, I guess, because of the better, work standards, I guess, in Vietnam. I'm not going to even act like I know about work standards in Vietnam. So, but that was just another point that, a lot of people, commented on when the shoe was announced. So if you're want to watch that, you can find that on YouTube. Again, Ruslan KD, it's spelled RUSLANKD, talks about a ton of stuff with Jonathan Isaac. So if you're interested in that, you can go and watch that. And then Luke, a little Osceola Magic news this week.
Yeah, some of you guys might have seen it yesterday, or September 2nd, I should say, since you guys are listening to this on September 4th, Labor Day, that the Osceola Magic made it really what is considered I don't know, it would be a blockbuster trade in terms of G League standards, where the Osceola Magic are dealing away 3 different players, one of which Magic fans are very familiar with, and Jay Scrubb, who did a lot of shouldering the weight for Osceola last year when he was playing games for them. Jay Scrubb is who the Osceola Magic are sending. Jay Scrubb, Devontae, I'm not even going to act like I know how to say this, Kakak, I don't know, and Micah Potter are all going to the South Bay Lakers, obviously the G League affiliate of the Los Angeles Lakers. And returning player rights there is Trevelin Queen, who this is where we want to explain, because Jonathan and I both admittedly were a little bit confused. Yeah, didn't we just acquire this guy and South Bay had nothing to do with it? So why are we now dealing with South Bay and the rights of Jay Scrubb? This is where we're still learning when it comes to the G League, and how now that the NBA is becoming so interactive with the G League and transactionally, the Magic recently, with Trevelin Queen, signed him to an Exhibit 10. As a result, to be able to have him sign to the Exhibit 10, have a chance to play, all those sort of things, unlike a two-way, you need their rights So you need their rights to be able to play, their player rights for the G League as well, because, doesn't go on, if it doesn't work out, he doesn't make the official Orlando Magic team, he can go on to play for the Osceola Magic at this point, because now you have his rights. Jonathan and I, we made sure we reached out to the right people and got an explanation. I got a couple different ones that aligned, obviously, both people in the basketball world with the Magic, and we're able to really lay it out for us. So that is really the example. I just wanted to clear that up for the people that might have been as confused as we were as to why this even happened yesterday when we already had signed Trevelin to the Exhibit 10. So best of luck to Trevelin. Jay Scrubb and those other guys are headed to the South Bay Lakers. At least their rights are. Now they obviously can go play overseas and whatever, and South Bay will just have their rights for when they return to the league if they decide they want to.
What it says to me is that it's not very likely that the Magic signed Trevelin to a two-way. Because if they knew that that's what they were leaning towards, then this wouldn't have been necessary. They could have just signed him to a two-way, and they wouldn't have needed his, quote unquote, returning player rights. At least that's, sort of the explanation that we got when we reached out, Luke. So,
yeah.
And again, to me, when we signed Trevelin Queen to the Exhibit 10, some people were like, "Oh, two-way coming," because he won the G League MVP a couple of years ago. But we already have so many guards. I was like, I don't really know that makes a ton of sense. And this, to me, sort of lines up with that philosophy that he's probably not headed for a two-way because, again, this wasn't really necessary if they weren't, if they were going to sign him to a two-way.
Yeah, and he's trying to make, at this point, the roster, essentially is what he's gunning for. He was a two-way with Fort Wayne, so he's wanting way more than a two-way, as most G League players are, but it's more of a reality for someone like him who has been in the G League for just a few years. He's still relatively young. He's a bucket. He's very talented. So I think that good things can happen for him. He's still very young in his career. I'm happy for him, and hopefully he can make some noise and camp or get picked up on a full contract, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about for those G League guys. They just want a contract. They don't care where. And working in the G League for a short amount of time I did, you still have a heart then for, rather than someone who might not have seen it firsthand, these guys, and got to know them and how great that a lot of them are. And at the end of the day, you just want them to be able to get paid to do what they love. And the G League, quite frankly, usually isn't really that, unless you just are on two-way for a very long time.
Moving on to the FIBA World Cup second round. First off, we're going to talk about Germany and Georgia, both of those teams' first foray in the second round here. If you need a reminder, Germany went 3-0 in the group stage. They were the top seed in their new group, which consisted of Germany, Georgia, Australia, and Slovenia. And you had two more games. Germany was going to face off against Georgia and Slovenia. If they won both of those games, they would finish as the top seed in that group and then move on to the semifinals. Basically, they're taking your first round record, bringing that over into the second, and then after you play your two additional games in each group, that is going to determine the seeding for the knockout round, officially starting with the quarterfinals. Germany took it to Georgia. It was a close game in the first half, and then Germany turned up the pressure in the second half, and they win this one going away 100-73. No Franz Wagner still. I think this was the third game or fourth game in a row that Franz missed for Germany since rolling the ankle against Finland a couple weeks ago. But Mo Wagner in 20 minutes off the bench, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal, was a plus 21 for Germany. And Goga Batadze off the bench for Georgia in 24 minutes, 15 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. He was a minus 11 for Georgia. Again, Georgia put up a good fight in the first half, Luke, but just couldn't get it done. And then Germany had one more game against Slovenia to see how they were going to finish the group stage. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But then, Luke, we had USA versus Montenegro on Friday. And this was a close one, really, until the last few minutes. Montenegro's size and just the rebounding advantage that they had in this game just gave the U.S. a ton of problems. We knew this when the roster came out, that rebounding was going to be an issue, but really was a huge issue in this one. But the U.S. escapes with an 85-73 win over Montenegro. The Magic's Paolo Banchero, 14 and a half minutes, 8 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal. And Nikola Vucevic, Orlando Magic legend for Montenegro, in 26 minutes, 18 points, 16 rebounds, including 7 offensive rebounds. The U.S. as a whole, Luke, had 31 rebounds. Montenegro had 23 offensive rebounds in this game. And that was really, Luke, what allowed Montenegro to stay in the game and really just give the U.S. a hard time and make this a much closer game than it ever should have been.
And I think this is kind of where the conversation starts as far as Steve Kerr, his substitutions, who he's playing. Because you see a guy like Vooch, who obviously can rebound the basketball. And in this one, he has 16 rebounds. And then you look and Walker Kessler played 5 minutes. At some point, and I believe I didn't watch the Lithuania game, but at some point, the lack of rebounding or lack of size rears its ugly head, and you're going to start running into that issue with these teams, especially the later you get. A lot of these international teams are decent rebounding teams, but this should have been an eye-opener, and then you play Lithuania, and I believe much of the same. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people are questioning Kerr and what he's doing and why he's playing certain personnel. He's really committed to this small ball thing. He's very tunnel-visioned on it. At what point do you give Kessler the nod to just literally go in there and be a rebounder? Because in this game, he plays 5 minutes against Montenegro, and I don't know what's going to happen from here, but you got to address it, I think.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that, I think, as we go through and we talk about the U.S. and Lithuania game, but you're exactly right. Like, this was a bad omen. Like, Cam Johnson did not play at all in this game for USA. I think Walker Kessler, playing the 5 minutes that he did, it was just really apparent that the U.S. needed more of a rebounding punch and just like rim protection in general in this game. But you would think that this game would have been sort of a wake-up call, especially when you see just kind of the similar style of play that Montenegro and Lithuania have, and you're going from playing a guy in Nikola Vucevic, and then you have a guy like Jonas Valanciunas for Lithuania. So it should have been like the writing on the wall. Again, we talked about this when the roster was announced, like, oh, well, rebounding is probably going to be an issue on this team. But then the weapons at the coach's disposal to help improve that in the middle of the game weren't really utilized properly. But yeah, this was sort of the writing on the wall heading into the Lithuania game, was going to be, how does the U.S. sort of adjust to the issues that they had with Montenegro?
And the other thing is, well, Josh Hart up to this point has been your rebounder. Double-digit rebounds in multiple games, I believe, up to that point. But surprise, surprise, Josh Hart goes up against actual rebounding talent, and he's not able to do it. Not in this game, not in the next game. So something's got to give. Kerr cannot afford, if this team wants to win the gold, cannot afford for this to happen. I don't know that at this point in the game, you're going to be able to run guys out of the gym. Teams have gotten this far because they've gotten this far, and you've got to address weaknesses. The small ball stuff just might not cut it long term. And unfortunately, the way this roster is constructed, you've got Triple J and Walker Kessler, and then that's really it. And obviously you have Josh Hart, but as far as true guys that are going to rebound for you, your options are pretty limited, and that might be why he's selling out for the small ball, because he doesn't really have an option.
Then the last game of Friday was Slovenia versus Australia. And this game was basically like, winner is going to move on. And Australia, they tried their best. They put up a good fight, made it close in the last few minutes of this game. But Slovenia ends up with the 91-80 victory, essentially ending Australia's World Cup run. And it wasn't even really by the hands of Luka Doncic. Like, Luka in 29 minutes had 19 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. But you've got guys like Gregor Hrovat with 10 points, Mike Tobe, 18 points, Prepelic, 11 points, Nikolic, 9 points off the bench. Jacob Sabasic, 9 points off the bench. Like, it was really a full team effort by Slovenia. And you look across, down to the other bench there, and you got Josh Giddey, 25 points, Patty Mills, 17 points, was awesome. Dante Exum, 13 points, but 4 of 13 from the floor. And Australia really just doesn't get any offense anywhere else. And Slovenia just continued to knock down shots and made plays throughout this game. And now Australia is a team who was projected to go pretty far into this tournament and bounced. Had a game today against Georgia, which was really, I think, just mostly for like Olympic qualifying and stuff like that. But basically, that game really didn't matter in terms of this World Cup, as both teams were really already eliminated from advancing. But yeah, our boy Joe Ingles finished this game 26 minutes, 0 points, 2 assists, 1 personal foul, was a -6 for Australia. Joe Ingles really did not have a great FIBA World Cup, which is a little alarming to some Magic fans. Like, how much does Joe Ingles really have left in the tank? FIBA is really different from the NBA, and he's going to have a lot more talent around him. Really, it was like the shooting that he really struggled with. Playmaking, he was pretty much fine for Australia when he was asked to do that, but just in terms of scoring and knocking down open shots, not a great World Cup for our boy Joe Ingles.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, I don't know that obviously this could be inaccurate as far as what he's done, but it looks like he's been averaging about 8 or 9 points a game in FIBA. Again, these could be inaccurate, but even in past international play, I mean, he hasn't gotten over 11 points a game since 2012. So it's a role thing, I want to think. But even still, I mean, he
was also just bad not making open looks.
Yeah. So we'll see what ends up happening with Joe Ingles. But I mean, listen, man, once a shooter, always a shooter. A drought is a drought. This guy can stroke that thing when it comes down to it, and you give him 82 games to get in that rhythm, and not just a short span like FIBA. I'm not worried about it. I don't expect him to play a huge role in this team, but we just need him to make shots when he's open. That's really it. And play make if need be, but I don't really think that's going to be asked of him much.
Yeah, a 2-week stretch of really not being able to shoot the basketball isn't something to be super concerned about. We saw Gary Harris not be able to buy a bucket for 2.5 months a couple seasons ago and still basically finish the season shooting 40% from 3. So just because a guy goes through a slump, doesn't mean it's over for Joe Ingles. So we're not saying that. We're not thinking that. If anyone is, let's just pump the brakes a little bit. It's just a bad FIBA World Cup run, but yeah, Australia's FIBA World Cup definitely cut short. Luke, let's take a second here just to give a special shout out to the wonderful folks that help make every episode possible, our awesome patrons. If you're not familiar with Patreon, it's a platform where you can support your favorite creators and just be a part of them creating things that you love. And we do have a Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/The6Man where if you just want to help support the show, you can do that for as little as $2 a month. If you want some additional benefits that we offer, we have other awesome tiers too. You can join in and be a part of what we're creating here. And as part of our Patreon, we give a special shout out to our Hall of Fame and Elite tier patrons on every single episode. So as always, I'll go ahead and start with our boys, the Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson Tulo, Jonathan Borges, Normal, Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, Donkey Punch Dave, Paolo and Francis Warren, Pierre A, Nostalgia and M&M's, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Eduardo Sanchez, Drummy, Danimal, Dutto 15, Bobby Skinner, PV in the Mix, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Eric Lopez, Fuchsia, Juan Geraldo, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Destined for Greatness, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Time Mr. TV, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95 Shred, Junior Bruce, Halfreak, and Shahin 177, Bulby the Dawn, Himlo, Ben Himro, RM Prop 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Kid 714, Spanking Season, Soft Taco, Victor Cologne, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Only Franz, Maria, Keith Wallace, Fritz, Currency Kev, and Bruv Sal. A big thank you to all of our patrons, our Hall of Fame and Elite tier patrons. If you would like to join our Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/The6Man Show. Luke, on Sunday, we got into the final games of the second group phase and sort of determining who was going to be moving on to the, what are we at now? The quarterfinals and officially the knockout round, where if you lose, you go home. But Australia and Georgia were still playing in some classification games. Australia with the 184 win over Georgia. Joe Ingles in that one, 10 points, 3 of 9 from the floor, 3 of 7 from behind the arc, good for 42.9%. Good to see from Joe Ingles. Added 6 assists, 5 rebounds, and a steal. And for Georgia, Goga on the other end in almost 30 minutes, 20 points, 5 rebounds, and no assists in that one for Goga. Goga at times throughout this World Cup, Luke, a little bit frustrated with his role, and sometimes Georgia was not getting Goga the ball whenever he wanted. And then we had Germany versus Slovenia. This was really going to determine, who's, Germany was moving on, to the next round there. Regardless, this is really just a game, for seeding. Both of these teams were going to move on. And Germany with the 100-71 victory over Slovenia, even without Franz Wagner. So this team has been so impressive throughout the warm-up games, throughout the World Cup. They've been playing the last 3 or 4 games without Franz Wagner. And again, guys are just answering the bell for Germany. Mo Wagner, 10 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, and 2 steals for Germany in 17 minutes. And Luka, not his best game for Slovenia, 23 points, but 22 field goal attempts. So Germany and like the totality, sort of, the sum of the parts, just too much for Slovenia. So Germany ends as the top team in what was that Group K, I believe. I may be mistaken there, but they're going to face off against Latvia on Wednesday as their first game of the quarterfinals, Luke. And now we're going to move on to the just absolute atrocity that was USA versus Lithuania. Lithuania pulling out the 110-104 over the US. Luke, Lithuania started this game by making 9 straight 3-point attempts. USA was down pretty big early on. I think they were down by as much as like 19 in this one. Came all the way back to make it a 4-point game late in the fourth quarter, but just could never get over that like 4 to 6 point hump. Lithuania would get the lead back out to 7 or 8, and US would cut it to 6. They'd cut it to 4, and then it'd be back out to 8 or back out to 9. USA would get it back to 6. They'd get it back to 4, and then Lithuania would just get it back out to 6. Like the US down the stretch just could not get multiple stops. And if they got multiple stops, they could not get consecutive buckets. And the offensive execution, I know we've been talking about this. Yes, the U.S. shot 53% from the floor in this game, but also just got crushed on the glass, out-rebounded 43-27. Lithuania had 18 offensive rebounds in this game. And Lithuania shot 14 for 25 from behind the arc, 56%. Anytime you let your opponent do that, you're going to have a tough time winning. Paolo Banchero, 6 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal in 16 minutes. He was a minus 14, really the worst of anyone on the floor for USA in this one. And looking across the way, Jonas Valanciunas, 12.7 rebounds. And of course, Ignas Brazdeikis, 11 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists in 21 minutes for Lithuania. Luke, you talked about it earlier, but all of the shortcomings that we've seen from this Team USA throughout the friendly games, throughout the first few World Cup games, all sort of showed up at the same time for USA in this game, and they lose to Lithuania.
Yeah, not too much to add in this one for me, Jonathan. I transparently didn't watch the game. You have been way more locked into these, as people know, as you've been providing great coverage on Twitter as best you can, and doing a great job with it. So I lean more on you for obviously the recaps and things like that when it comes to FIBA, but there's really not much else to add as far as the rebounding, which we've talked about, in the hot shooting start. I didn't know the Lithuania started like that. I knew they shot well throughout the game, but I didn't know they came out of the gates firing like they did. It makes sense getting up as much as they did. And did it seem like at any point that it, like, especially out of the gate, was it more like just tough shot making from Lithuania, or did USA seem a step slow because maybe they already knew their ticket was punched? Or
it was a little bit of both. Like throughout the game, Lithuania made a ton of tough shots, but especially to start the game, like the US was just like a step slow, not crisp on their rotations or when they were switching or sort of where to help, and like just slow closeout to guys. And like after a team starts 4 of 4 or 5 for 5 from 3, you gotta switch something up. You gotta switch your coverage up. Just stay a lot tighter to some of these guys. But again, like they're rebounding right away in this game. Like Valanciunas had such an advantage. And even defensively, like Lithuania was just like really packing the paint. And Team USA was like, well, we're just super athletic and talented, so we're just going to drive right into these guys, hope we get fouled, and try to finish around them. And they just did that time and time again, like especially in the first half, and it wasn't working. This game was really only as close as it was because Anthony Edwards, 35 points, 53% from the floor. Like Anthony Edwards did basically everything he could to keep the U.S. in this game. And even he wasn't getting the best looks. Like he was just making stuff happen like out of thin air. But it was just so much hero ball of like, hey, we're down right now. The offense isn't really flowing. I'm just going to try to do something myself here and go get a bucket. Like, I hate to hate on Jalen Brunson. Like, he's been criminally, underrated over the last couple of years, by me in particular. Like, I thought it was a crazy signing by the Knicks, but like when Jalen Brunson is in the game and he's the one operating the offense, like it has absolutely zero flow whatsoever. It really becomes like when he is on the floor with Anthony Edwards, it becomes like my turn, your turn kind of offense. And that can work a lot of times in the NBA where you have more spacing, like the 3-point line is further, you have better athletes. There's just more spacing during those games, and that can work at times. But it's really hard just to sort of like put your head down and get to the rim unless you're like really a dynamic athlete. Anthony Edwards is great at this. Jalen Brunson is not what I would call a dynamic athlete, like is very crafty, but doesn't have like, I would say like an explosive first step in the way that maybe like a guy like Dennis Schroeder, who is great at doing that in FIBA for Germany. Like, oh, we need a bucket. I'm just going to get to the rim. Like a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander for Canada. Oh, we need a bucket. I'm just going to try to get to the rim and make something happen. Jalen Brunson relies a lot on angles and forcing contact and being great at touch and finishing around the rim. And I just don't think that style of offense has been particularly effective for the U.S. The U.S. has been best in FIBA play, international play this summer, when they're getting stops, they're getting out in transition, or when they're just whipping the ball around in the half court. And we didn't really see any of that versus Montenegro and now against Lithuania. The U.S. started on like a 13-2 run to start the second half to like really get back into the game. But after that 13-2 run, like sort of let their foot back off the gas. And like Montenegro just went and continued, not Montenegro in this game, Lithuania continued to just rebound the ball and knock down threes. And particularly frustrating is Walker Kessler comes into this game. He only played 6 minutes, was a -10, got 1 rebound in that time. But Walker Kessler, he hasn't played a lot for this team like the entire summer so far. But when like Valanciunas is just out here like eating up boards and Sedek Curses, I'm screwing this guy's name up so bad, but he had 11 rebounds in this game. When those guys are just feasting on the glass, something needs to change, whether it's like a Jaren Jackson, Bobby Portis lineup, or if it's Paolo Banchero and Walker Kessler being out there. Like these, 4 wing lineups that Kerr likes to run, like it's the death lineup Golden State Warriors. Like it is not working against Montenegro and Lithuania. And the absolute refusal to go away from that almost cost them the game against Montenegro and cost them this game against Lithuania. And as you get further into this tournament, like the U.S. actually got a little bit lucky with the way that everything is sort of breaking, because had they won, they would have been playing Serbia, who's played really well in this tournament. But since they lost, they're getting a better matchup in Italy, which the U.S. should be able to beat Italy. and move on to the semifinals. So you sort of get a little bit lucky. But look, if you go up against Latvia or Germany in the semifinals and you don't address any of these issues that you've had throughout the tournament, the U.S. are going to have a disappointing semifinal, and they will lose in the semifinal if they play the way they did today, and if there are issues that Kerr just absolutely refuses to make any adjustments to.
Yeah, I do wonder the continuity that he's had in Golden State, like what he has built with like these small ball lineups, if that's just hurting Team USA and the sense of his theory and willingness to adjust. Typically, if you have an issue rebounding against other teams, if you're Golden State, you could just rely on hot shooting. And like you said, spacing is just so vastly different that the option really isn't there. You can make tough buckets, but I don't know that you're going to just have all these open threes that the Warriors can generate with everyone being so great off the ball, especially when you got guys on the team who, quite frankly, don't want to move off ball. They don't want to pass the ball. It's kind of just the colliding of these two worlds that unfortunately creates the perfect storm for Team USA and allows these teams with rebounding advantages to take advantage. I don't know what he'll do moving forward, but I do hope that, you know, he would adjust and at least take some accountability for the fact that the Montenegro win was as close as it was, came down to the wire until they could pull away, and then this Lithuania loss on top of it.
Andy Liu, who is part of the Light Years pod for the Blue Wire Network, covers the Golden State Warriors. He tweeted this out because he's in California, so this game was started at 5:40 or whatever it was there. He tweeted, "I wake up to Lithuania making nonsense threes against a Team USA playing weirdo lineups that should have been up by 10 to begin with. Yeah, I know a Kerr coach team when I see one. LOL. I'm going back to sleep." So you have a guy that watches Steve Kerr, 90 plus, 95 plus games a year, regular season and playoffs. And like, this is evidence of a Steve Kerr coach team, like refusal to get away from what has worked in the past, essentially is what it comes down to. And like you said, like he's had so much experience with those Golden State teams. Well, guess what? This is not the Golden State team. And like, if you're going to be the lead decision maker on this Team USA roster, like you need to be, that's in FIBA, like every game is different because every team has different styles of play, and you need to be ready to adjust to that. Like these last two games, we should not need any further evidence of like, okay, you have a game plan. Game plan didn't work. You're getting your butt kicked. Throw the game plan in the garbage. Try to adjust to what the other team is doing. That is putting you at a disadvantage. And to their credit, they really ratcheted up the pressure in the beginning of the second half. They were getting stops. It was like if Lithuania missed, they were getting the rebound, they were going the other way. And it was just like as soon as Lithuania sort of like got back in gear, the US could just never get close again. And it's just really frustrating. But now we have a super interesting quarterfinal with US and Paolo Banchero going against Italy. That's going to be interesting to see the Italian fans' reactions to Paolo Banchero. If they were smart, they would just get over it and cheer this guy in the hopes that one day, as he's aging, he wants to come and play for the Italian national team. Don't burn that bridge, guys. The kid is 20 years old. He's got a lot of basketball left to play. You don't want to just completely like ruin that relationship right off the rip. Although, as we've seen in social media comments, these Italian fans are very, very passionate. And then Germany going against Latvia, which Latvia has been really one of the big, I don't want to say Cinderella stories exactly, but they've been a great story in the tournament with some upsets. Definitely, not a lot of people picked them to get as far as they have, going up against Germany on Wednesday. And if the U.S. and Germany are both able to win, where had the U.S. won today against Lithuania, then the earliest Germany and USA would have seen each other would have been the finals. Now, if both of those teams win in the quarterfinals, they will face off in the semifinals, which will be really a strong conflict of interest because we have Franz, we have Paolo, but also because I've got a nice bet that I put on Germany to win this entire tournament where I paid $20, and if they win, it pays out 500. So,
Right.
you know, my loyalty right now is being tested for sure, Luke.
Yeah.
But man, what a matchup that would be in the FIBA semifinals, Paolo versus Franz, if Franz is able to come back.
And just because I keep up mainly with betting lines in general, as you guys know, I always tend to bring it up. It's always brought into discussion somehow. And that's what I'm going to do right now for us, Jonathan, because it's about all I contribute to a FIBA conversation. USA minus 155 to win as it stands the World Cup. Canada plus 400. Germany with the third best odds plus 800. Serbia plus 1,000. Lithuania plus 1,600. Slovenia plus 2,300. Italy plus 5,000. And Latvia plus 7,000. So there's your odds. What were the odds for Germany plus what?
I don't remember exactly what it was, but basically $20 turns into 500 if it cashes for me. I can go ahead and try to log into my account as quickly as I can.
Plus 2,500 maybe? I don't know. But
go to
it's
my
plus
open
800
bets
now.
here.
So you obviously got into it at the right time.
Plus 2,500 is what I got Germany
I was right. Wow. That was the first time I've ever done mental math correctly. So incredible display of talent by me. Now they're plus 800. So if you didn't get in on Germany then, I feel bad for you, Jonathan. So it looks like a great bet. Third best odds now to win. And you just need the U.S. to struggle a little bit in that game, obviously, if it comes down to it, what they can meet in the semifinal. Is that right?
Correct.
Cool.
And now, like, Germany, has one of the more favorable matchups of the quarterfinals, at least on paper, versus Latvia. Latvia has been playing really, really well. But if Germany is able to get past Latvia, and then, like, Germany was up 15 points, I think it was, in the third quarter against the U.S. when they played a few weeks ago. If the U.S. isn't able to get their stuff together and Germany is able to pull off, what would be an upset, then Germany goes into the final, and you're looking at the other half of the bracket in Lithuania, Serbia, Canada, Slovenia. Canada, a team that Germany's already beat this summer, lost to in another overtime game. Like, if Germany makes, like, the final, like, I just, looking at this, like, Germany has just as good a chance as any. We've been saying this. I've been saying this. Germany has just as good a chance as any of these teams to win the FIBA World Cup. I don't understand how they're still at, what you say, plus 800?
Plus 800.
I don't understand how I got, plus 600?
8.
Oh, plus 800. I thought you corrected me, but even a couple weeks ago, I didn't understand how I was getting them at plus 2,500. Like, they're obviously not watching, this Germany team. But yeah, USA obviously could flip the switch, start playing really well, and win the next few games by 20 each. And I don't think anybody would be super surprised. But they're running out of time, and they're lucky that performance came in the second round where they had already advanced essentially, and that it didn't come in the knockout round because they'd be going home. And that was another thing that I saw today. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, Lithuania sends home the USA. Like, no, y'all, like, this game didn't mean that much, even though it did mean a ton. So last week of the FIBA World Cup here, I know my sleep schedule is really going to appreciate it when it's all said and done, but it's been a great tournament so far. It's been a lot of fun, Luke. And yeah, once FIBA World Cup is over, we literally have 3 weeks in one day until Media Day and Magic preseason starts. So really looking forward to that. Super excited for this season.
Yeah, just about 31 days away from that Media Day, but who's counting?
All right, what do you say we wrap it up?
Let's wrap it.
Let's do it. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this one. For Luke Sylvia, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to The Sixth Man Show. We will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!